The Galactic Defense Academy's orientation hall buzzed with nervous energy as hundreds of cadets from dozens of species filled the crystalline amphitheater. Chittering insectoids clustered near the ceiling vents, their compound eyes reflecting the soft blue lighting. Massive Cronin warriors, their stone-like hides scarred from countless battles, occupied reinforced seating designed to accommodate their 12-foot frames. Delicate ethereal beings floated in specialized atmospheric pods, their translucent forms shimmering like aurora. Among them all sat Sarah Chen, unremarkable in her standard-issue grey jumpsuit, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. At 23 Earth years old, she was neither the youngest nor the oldest recruit, neither the tallest nor the strongest. She was, by all appearances, completely ordinary. The other cadets gave her a wide berth, not out of respect or fear, but out of bewilderment. Humans were known throughout the galaxy as the species that somehow survived despite being laughably fragile. They had no natural armor, no venomous fangs, no ability to photosynthesize their own nutrients. They couldn't even see in the dark properly. Yet somehow, impossibly, they had not only survived but thrived on a death world that would kill most galactic species within hours. "Look at the pink skin," chittered Zexai, a mantoid whose razor-sharp forearms could slice through Durastyle. "She looks like she would break if I breathed on her too hard." His companion, a hulking Ursoid named Gramash, rumbled his agreement. "I heard humans have to sleep for 8 hours every day. 8 hours! Can you imagine being unconscious and defenseless for a third of your existence? It's a miracle their species survived to develop space travel." Commander Velfix strode onto the central platform, her 6 legs moving in perfect synchronization. The arachnoid's 8 eyes swept across the assembled cadets as silence fell across the amphitheater. She had commanded fleets in the border wars, her tactical brilliance legendary throughout military circles. "Welcome to the Galactic Defense Academy." Her voice resonated through the hall's bioacoustic systems. "You are here because your species believes you have what it takes to defend civilization against the growing threat of the Void Swarm. Over the next 6 months, you will be tested in ways that will break the weak and forge the strong into weapons of justice." She paused, her primary eyes focusing on different sections of the crowd. "You will learn that individual strength means nothing without unity. You will discover that the greatest warriors are not those who fight alone, but those who can lead others into battle and bring them home alive." Her gaze lingered on Sarah for a moment longer than seemed necessary. "Some of you look at your fellow cadets and see weakness. Some of you see differences to vision. You are wrong. The greatest strength of our alliance has always been diversity, the unique capabilities each species brings to our common defense. The first week of training was a brutal awakening. Physical conditioning pushed every cadet to their biological limits and beyond. Sarah found herself consistently in the bottom third of every measured metric. While Cronin cadets lifted massive weights with casual ease, she struggled with loads a fraction of their capacity. During speed trials, the insectoid mantoids moved so quickly they appeared as blurs, while Sarah's legs pumped frantically just to maintain a respectable pace. The other cadets' initial amusement gradually shifted to pity, then irritation. During group exercises, Sarah became a liability that dragged down team performance scores. Her presence meant lower rankings, reduced privileges, and increased scrutiny from instructors. "Chen, you're holding us back again," growled Tax, a reptilian saurian whose ancestors had conquered 3 star systems before joining the Alliance. "Maybe you should consider transferring to the agricultural corps. Growing food is more your speed." Sarah said nothing, simply nodded and returned to her equipment check. She had learned early in life that words were often wasted on those who had already made up their minds. Her father, a cargo ship engineer, had taught her that actions spoke louder than arguments. The breaking point came during a simulated combat exercise in the Academy's vast holographic training chamber. 30 cadets were divided into 2 teams and tasked with capturing a strategic position while defending against waves of simulated Void Swarm drones. The exercise was designed to test tactical thinking, leadership potential, and the ability to coordinate diverse abilities under pressure. Sarah found herself assigned to Blue Team, led by Crackstar, a Predator-class felonid whose reflexes were so fast they bordered on precognitive. His team included some of the Academy's most promising cadets, Vexay the Mantoid Warrior, 2 Ursoid Heavy Assault Specialists, and a cluster of hive-mind collective entities who could process tactical data at superhuman speeds. Red Team was no less impressive, anchored by Princess Lyralay of the Ethereal Houses, whose psionic abilities could coordinate her team's movements with telepathic precision. The scenario began in a bombed-out cityscape, twisted metal and shattered concrete providing cover and obstacles. Blue Team's objective was a fortified bunker complex at the city's heart, while Red Team held defensive positions throughout the urban maze. Krekstar's strategy was straightforward. Use overwhelming force to punch through Red Team's perimeter, then establish fire superiority while the collective entities hacked the bunker's defense systems. It was a solid plan that played to his team's obvious strengths. The attack began with typical Felonid precision. Krekstar led his warriors in a lightning-fast assault on Red Team's forward positions, his natural agility allowing him to bound between cover points faster than the defenders could track. The Ursoids provided suppressing fire with their heavy weapons, while Vexai used his blade arms to slice through defensive barriers. For the first 10 minutes, the plan worked flawlessly. Red Team fell back under the sustained assault, yielding ground as Blue Team pressed their advantage. Krekstar's confidence grew with each successful advance. Then, the Void Swarm simulation activated. The artificial drones descended from the holographic sky like a plague of metal locusts, their weapon systems lighting up the battlefield with deadly energy beams. The scenario had suddenly become a three-way battle, with both teams now forced to defend themselves while maintaining their primary objectives. Krekstar's aggressive formation collapsed almost immediately. His warriors were caught in the open, perfect targets for the aerial assault. The Ursoids' heavy weapons, devastatingly effective against ground targets, proved inadequate against highly maneuverable flying opponents. Within minutes, half of Blue Team's combat-effective members were eliminated from the simulation. Fall back to the warehouse district, Krekstar snarled, his tactical display showing Red Team consolidating their defensive positions while efficiently dealing with the drone threat. We need better cover. Sarah, who had been relegated to equipment carrier and kept safely in the rear, watched the disaster unfold with growing concern. The remaining Blue Team members were panicking, their formation discipline breaking down as individual survival instincts overrode team coordination. She studied her tactical display, noting the movement patterns of both the drones and Red Team's defensive responses. Something nagged at her, a pattern she almost recognized but couldn't quite grasp. She had seen similar coordination before, but where? Then it clicked. The drone's behavior reminded her of something from Earth. The hunting patterns of wolf packs her father had shown her in nature documentaries during their long cargo runs between star systems. Pack hunters that used coordinated attacks to isolate and overwhelm prey much larger than individual pack members. But wolves had weaknesses. They could be confused, misdirected, turned against each other, if you understood their instincts well enough. Sarah activated her comm channel to Krekstar. "Sir, request permission to take point." The Felonid's laugh was bitter. "Chen, this isn't the time for misplaced heroism. We need to regroup and—" "Sir, I think I know how to neutralize the drone swarm," Sarah interrupted, something she had never done before in training. "But I need operational command of the team." The suggestion was so absurd that even the chaos of battle seemed to pause. Krekstar stared at her through his helmet display. His vertical pupils dilated with stress and disbelief. "You want me to turn command over to you? The human who can barely complete a basic obstacle course?" "Yes, sir. I believe I can get us to the objective." Vexehai's chittering laughter cut through the comm channel. The pink skin has finally snapped under pressure. Krekstar, just order her to take cover and... A massive explosion rocked their position as a squadron of drones focused fire on the warehouse they had been using for cover. 3 more Blue Team members were eliminated in the blast, their armor systems registering fatal damage. Sarah's voice remained calm despite the chaos. "Sir, we have maybe 2 minutes before we're completely overrun. I need your decision now." Krekstar looked at his tactical display. 8 team members remaining out of 15 original. Red Team had lost only 3 members and was still holding their primary defensive positions. The drone swarm showed no signs of diminishing, and his conventional tactics were proving worse than useless. He had nothing left to lose. "Fine, Chen. You have command. But when this fails, it's on your record." Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settle over her like a familiar coat. This was what she had been waiting for, not the physical challenges or the academic tests, but the opportunity to prove that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in their bodies, but in their minds. "All Blue Team members, this is Chen assuming tactical command," she broadcast on the team frequency. "I need everyone to acknowledge and confirm you're prepared to follow orders without question." The responses came reluctantly, some openly skeptical. But they came. Sarah studied the battlefield through her tactical interface, noting the positions of remaining team members, the patrol patterns of the drone swarm, and Red Team's defensive setup. Her mind began to work, processing variables and possibilities, with the same methodical approach her father had taught her for solving engineering problems. Listen carefully, she began, her voice carrying a new authority that surprised even herself. We're not going to fight the drones. We're going to make them fight each other. The explanation came quickly, her words painting a clear picture of her strategy. Human military doctrine from Earth's history included extensive studies of asymmetric warfare, how smaller, weaker forces could defeat superior opponents through intelligence misdirection and exploiting enemy weaknesses. The drones operated on pack-hunting algorithms, but those same algorithms could be turned into weaknesses. If Blue Team could present multiple apparent threats simultaneously while staying mobile, they could trigger the swarm's pursuit protocols. More importantly, if they could lure different drone squadrons into overlapping engagement zones, the artificial intelligences would begin targeting each other as potential threats. Grex and Tom. Sarah addressed the two remaining Ursoids. I need you to establish a heavy weapons position in the industrial complex. Grid reference 77 Alpha. Make lots of noise, lots of visible muzzle flashes, but stay mobile. Don't try to actually hit the drones. Just get their attention. Vexai, you're our rabbit. I need you moving fast through the residential district, staying visible but avoiding engagement. Draw as many drones as possible into pursuit mode, then break line of sight and double back. Collective entities, can you access the city's emergency broadcast system? The response came in perfect unison from the three HiveMind members. Affirmative. Emergency protocols are accessible through municipal data networks. Could. I need you to trigger every alarm, every warning system, every automated distress beacon in the city. I want the entire grid lighting up with false targets and conflicting signals. Kregstar found himself drawn into Sarah's tactical vision despite his skepticism. What about the objective? The bunker? Sarah's smile was barely visible through her helmet's faceplate, but her confidence was unmistakable. Sir, we're going to walk right through the front door, while everyone else is distracted by the fireworks show. The plan began to unfold with clockwork precision. The Ursoids opened fire from their new position, their heavy weapons lighting up the industrial complex like a miniature sun. Dozens of drones immediately vectored towards the obvious threat, their formation shifting from patrol mode to attack configuration. Simultaneously, Vexai burst from cover in the residential area, his natural speed allowing him to race between buildings while staying barely ahead of pursuing drone squadrons. His route had been carefully planned to intersect with the drones responding to the Ursoid's position, creating a convergence zone where multiple AI systems would conflict over target priority. The collective entities activated their hack, and suddenly the entire simulated city came alive with electronic noise. Emergency sirens wailed, automated distress calls flooded communication channels, and thousands of false heat signatures bloomed across drone targeting systems. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The swarm's coordinated behavior began to break down as individual units received conflicting priority targets. Drone squadrons that had been operating with machine-like precision suddenly found themselves engaging each other, their IFF systems overwhelmed by contradictory data inputs. Sarah watched the chaos unfold on her tactical display, noting the gaps appearing in the swarm's coverage as units were drawn away from their patrol routes. But the real test was still ahead, getting past Red Team's defenses. Kregstar, you're with me, she said, checking her equipment one final time. We're going to demonstrate why humans are still alive despite being the galaxy's favorite prey species. They moved through the urban maze like ghosts, using routes that Sarah had identified during her careful study of the battlefield. While the spectacular battles raged in other sectors of the city, they advanced through areas the drones had abandoned, and Red Team had never bothered to fortify. Sarah's approach to stealth was fundamentally different from Kregstar's natural predator instincts. Where the Felonid relied on speed and agility to avoid detection, Sarah used patience and planning. She had mapped not just the physical terrain but the psychological landscape of their opponent's expectations. Red Team was watching for another direct assault like Kregstar's initial attack. They were prepared for obvious routes of approach, conventional tactics, predictable behavior. They weren't watching for two figures moving slowly through the service tunnels beneath the city, accessing maintenance corridors that led directly under their fortified positions. The bunker's rear entrance was guarded, but lightly. Most of Red Team's strength was concentrated on the obvious approaches. Sarah and Kregstar emerged from the underground maze less than 50 meters from their objective, hidden by the shadows of abandoned vehicles and debris. How did you know about the tunnel system? Kregstar whispered, his respect for the human's tactical awareness growing despite his preconceptions. Sarah's response was matter-of-fact. I read the environmental briefing files that came with the scenario. Most species focus on the combat parameters and ignore the infrastructure details. Humans learned a long time ago that understanding your environment is just as important as understanding your enemy. The final assault was anticlimactic. While Red Team remained focused on the spectacular drone battle consuming most of the city, two figures slipped past their perimeter and captured the objective with minimal resistance. The simulation ended with Blue Team's victory, their tactical display showing the battlefield still swarming with drones engaged in self-destructive combat. The post-exercise debriefing was conducted in stunned silence. Instructors reviewed the tactical recordings while cadets from both teams tried to process what they had witnessed. Sarah Chen, the human everyone had dismissed as the weakest link, had not only led her team to victory, but had done so using methods none of them had even considered. Commander Vathix studied the data with her usual analytical precision, her 8 eyes processing multiple information streams simultaneously. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a new undertone of respect. Cadet Chen, explain your tactical reasoning for the drone manipulation strategy. Sarah stood at attention, her posture straight despite her exhaustion. Ma'am, the Void Swarm operates on collective intelligence principles similar to Earth pack hunters. By understanding their behavioral patterns and creating artificial stimuli, it was possible to exploit their coordination algorithms and turn their strength into a weakness. And the tunnels? Environmental intelligence, ma'am. Most species focus on obvious tactical factors, but humans have learned that infrastructure and environmental details often provide the most decisive advantages. The commander's primary eyes fixed on Sarah with laser intensity. Where did you learn these tactical concepts? From my father, ma'am. He taught me that the best solutions usually come from understanding problems differently than everyone else expects. Vaelfix's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. Your father is military? Cargo ship engineer, ma'am. But he always said that survival principles are the same whether you're dealing with pirates, equipment failures, or alien wildlife. You have to think your way out of trouble because you usually can't fight your way out. The debriefing continued for another hour, with instructors analyzing every aspect of Sarah's unconventional strategy. Other cadets listened with growing amazement as the true complexity of her plan became clear. She had not simply gotten lucky or stumbled onto a solution. She had systematically analyzed the scenario, identified multiple interconnected weaknesses, and orchestrated a plan that turned her team's apparent disadvantages into decisive strengths. As the session ended and cadets began filing out of the briefing room, Sarah found herself surrounded by species who had previously dismissed her as irrelevant. Questions came from all directions. How had she learned to think tactically? Where had these ideas come from? What other human military concepts might be applicable to galactic warfare? Sarah answered each question patiently, but her mind was already moving ahead to the next challenge. This victory was just the beginning. She had proven that humans could contribute more than just stubborn persistence to the Galactic Alliance. Now she needed to prove that they could lead it. Commander Vaelfix approached as the crowd of curious cadets gradually dispersed. Walk with me, Cadet Chen. They moved through the Academy's corridors in comfortable silence, passing observation windows that showed training exercises in progress. Other cadet groups were engaged in their own scenarios, but none showed the innovative thinking that had characterized Sarah's approach. You realize, the commander said eventually, that today's exercise was not actually about combat tactics. Sarah considered this carefully.
Was it better?
No, ma'am. It was about leadership potential and the ability to coordinate diverse capabilities under pressure.
Correct. And you have demonstrated something that our instructors have been hoping to see. The ability to recognize that different species think differently, and that those differences can be coordinated into something greater than the sum of their parts. They stopped before a massive view screen showing the galaxy beyond the Academy's orbital position. Thousands of stars gleamed in the darkness, many of them home to Alliance worlds that depended on graduates of this Academy for their protection. The Void Swarm is not like the enemies we have faced before, Vaelfix continued. They do not negotiate, they do not retreat, and they learn from every engagement. Defeating them will require new thinking, new approaches, new forms of cooperation between our species. She turned to face Sarah directly. I am recommending you for accelerated advancement to advanced tactical training. Your performance today suggests you may have the perspective we need to develop new doctrine for the coming war. Sarah felt the weight of the recommendation, understanding that her life had just taken a decisive turn. But she also felt something else, a growing certainty that humanity's role in the galactic community was about to change in ways no one expected. Thank you, ma'am. I won't disappoint you. Commander Vaelfix's mandibles clicked again, this time definitely in amusement. Cadet Chen, I have a feeling that disappointing people is the last thing you will ever do. As they parted ways, Sarah looked out at the stars and thought about her father's words. The best solutions come from understanding problems differently than everyone else expects. The galaxy was about to learn what that really meant when humans stopped trying to fit in and started leading the way. 3 months into advanced tactical training, Sarah Chen had become something of a legend at the Galactic Defense Academy. Her unconventional solutions to complex scenarios had earned grudging respect from instructors and fellow cadets alike. But respect and acceptance were two different things, and Sarah found herself walking a delicate line between proving human capabilities and avoiding the spotlight that came with too much success. The Advanced Tactical Wing occupied an entire level of the Academy's central spire, its chambers filled with the most sophisticated training equipment in known space. Holographic battlefields could simulate any environment from gas giant atmospheres to neutron star surfaces. Quantum processing cores generated enemy AI systems indistinguishable from actual void swarm tactics. Most importantly, the scenarios were designed by actual fleet commanders who had faced real combat against humanity's greatest threats. Sarah's training group consisted of only 12 cadets, each selected for exceptional performance during basic training. Besides herself, the group included Princess Lyrelay of the Ethereal Houses, whose psionic abilities had made her a tactical prodigy. Krekstar, whose initial skepticism had transformed into fierce loyalty after their first exercise together. And 9 other cadets representing the cream of their respective species' military traditions. Their instructor was Colonel Dex's High, a scarred veteran of the border wars whose tactical brilliance was matched only by his reputation for breaking cadets who couldn't meet his standards. The mantoid had lost 3 limbs in the Battle of Kepler Station, and the cybernetic replacements clicked softly when he moved, a constant reminder of the price of tactical miscalculation. Today we begin your introduction to multi-vector combat scenarios, Colonel Dexe announced, his compound eyes reflecting the chamber's ambient lighting. You will be facing simulations based on actual void swarm encounters. These are not theoretical exercises. Every scenario you experience represents a battle where real Alliance forces lived or died based on the quality of their tactical decisions. He paused, his cybernetic arm whirring as he gestured toward the holographic display that materialized in the chamber's center. The Void Swarm does not fight like any enemy we have previously encountered. They do not seek territory, resources, or political advantage. They exist solely to consume and convert organic life into more of themselves. Every engagement with them is a fight for species survival. The display showed a 3-dimensional tactical map of a star system under siege. Dozens of red icons represented Void Swarm vessels, while blue icons showed Alliance defensive forces. The scale was staggering. Fleets numbering in the hundreds of ships engaged in complex maneuvers across multiple orbital planes. This is the Altair system, 6 months ago, Dexai continued. 3 billion inhabitants across 7 worlds. The Alliance committed 2 full battle fleets to its defense, over 400 ships crewed by the finest warriors from 23 member species. The simulation began to play, showing the Alliance forces arranged in traditional defensive formations around the system's inhabited worlds. The Void Swarm approached in what appeared to be a conventional assault pattern, their black vessels moving with mechanical precision toward the inner planets. Fleet Admiral Korthax commanded the defense. Dexai said, his tone neutral despite the weight of his words. A brilliant strategist with 40 years of combat experience. He positioned his forces according to established doctrine, heavy units anchoring fixed defensive positions, mobile elements prepared to reinforce threatened sectors, reserve fleets held back to exploit tactical opportunities. Sarah watched the battle unfold with growing unease. The Alliance formations looked textbook perfect, exactly the kind of defensive strategy she had studied in her military history courses. But something about the Void Swarm's approach felt wrong. Too straightforward, too predictable for an enemy known for adaptive intelligence. The trap became apparent within the first hour of engagement. As Alliance forces committed to defending the obvious targets, massive Void Swarm reinforcements translated into the system's outer reaches. The enemy had used their initial wave as a diversion, drawing defensive forces out of position while their main assault force approached from an unexpected vector. The result, Dex High concluded as the simulation reached its devastating finale, was the complete loss of the Altair system. All 7 worlds consumed, both Alliance fleets destroyed or converted, 3 billion lives extinguished. Admiral Korthax's flagship was found drifting in the system's asteroid belt 2 weeks later, its crew transformed into Void Swarm bioconstructs. The silence in the chamber was absolute. Even the most battle-hardened cadets looked shaken by the scale of the disaster they had witnessed. Your assignment, the colonel continued, is to develop alternative tactical approaches that might have changed the outcome. You have access to the same intelligence data that was available to Admiral Corthax, the same fleet composition, the same strategic constraints. Your task is to prove that the Altair system could have been saved. Princess Lyrelay raised her hand, her ethereal form shimmering with agitation. Sir, with respect, if Admiral Corthax couldn't save the system with conventional doctrine, how are we supposed to succeed? He had decades more experience and vastly superior resources. Dexhay's mandibles clicked in what might have been approval. An excellent question, Princess. Perhaps the answer lies not in experience or resources, but in perspective. You are tasked with finding tactical solutions that experienced commanders would never consider. Sarah studied the tactical data as other cadets asked clarifying questions. The Altair system's defensive requirements seemed impossible. 7 worlds spread across multiple orbital planes, limited Alliance fleet strength, and an enemy whose capabilities were still largely unknown. Traditional defensive doctrine called for concentration of force, but protecting 7 separate targets required dispersion. The tactical mathematics appeared unsolvable, unless you changed the fundamental assumptions underlying the problem. Sarah activated her personal workstation and began accessing historical databases, looking not at military records, but at human-civilian shipping protocols. Her father's lessons echoed in her mind. Sometimes the best solution to a transportation problem came from understanding traffic patterns rather than engine capabilities. The key insight came from humanity's early asteroid mining operations. When confronted with the need to protect multiple scattered facilities from pirate attacks, human corporations had developed a defensive concept called dynamic positioning. Instead of trying to defend every possible target, they would continuously shift valuable assets between secure and decoy locations, making it impossible for attackers to plan effective strikes. Could the same principle be applied to planetary defense? Sarah began sketching out a radical alternative strategy. Instead of positioning fleets in static defensive formations around inhabited worlds, she proposed a mobile defense concept based on unpredictability and misdirection. Alliance forces would be divided into multiple small, highly mobile task forces that would constantly shift positions throughout the system. Decoy installations would be constructed on uninhabited worlds and asteroid stations, presenting false targets that would force the Void Swarm to divide their assault forces. Most importantly, her strategy assumed that the initial Void Swarm attack was a feint. Instead of committing defensive forces to repel the first wave, she proposed allowing them to approach their apparent targets, while hidden Alliance forces moved to intercept the real assault from an unexpected direction. The concept required precise coordination between dozens of independent task forces, real-time intelligence sharing across multiple species communication protocols, and a level of tactical flexibility that had never been attempted in galactic warfare. It was ambitious to the point of impossibility. It was also completely contrary to every principle of established military doctrine. Sarah worked through the night, refining her strategy and running preliminary simulations on her personal workstation. The mathematics were complex, but they seemed to work. By the time morning arrived, she had developed a comprehensive tactical plan that addressed every major variable in the Altair scenario. The presentation phase began with traditional approaches. Krextau proposed an aggressive forward defense, using his species' natural speed advantages to strike Void Swarm forces before they could establish system superiority. Princess Lyrelay suggested a psionic coordination network that would allow Alliance forces to react instantaneously to changing tactical situations. Other cadets offered variations on conventional defensive themes, each playing to their species' natural military strengths. All of their solutions were tactically sound, professionally presented, and completely inadequate to the scale of the challenge. When Sarah's turn came, she activated the chamber's holographic display and began her presentation with an unusual question. How many of you have studied human asteroid mining operations from the pre-Alliance period? The question was so unexpected that several cadets looked confused. Colonel Dex's compound eyes focused on Sarah with sudden intensity, recognizing that she was about to present something genuinely novel. Human mining corporations faced a similar strategic challenge, Sarah continued, her confidence growing as she warmed to her topic. They needed to protect multiple scattered facilities from pirate attacks, but they lacked the resources to station adequate defensive forces at every location. Their solution was to make the locations themselves mobile. The holographic display shifted to show Sarah's proposed fleet arrangement. Instead of the concentrated formations favored by traditional doctrine, Alliance forces were dispersed into dozens of small, mobile units scattered throughout the Altair system. More importantly, the inhabited worlds themselves were shown surrounded by massive industrial installations, not weapons platforms, but transportation infrastructure. The core principle is dynamic positioning, Sarah explained. Instead of trying to predict where the enemy will strike and positioning defenses accordingly, we make it impossible for them to plan effective strikes by constantly changing the positions of high-value targets. Princess Lyrelai's ethereal form flickered with interest. You're proposing to move entire planetary populations? Not the planets themselves, but the industrial and population centers that make them valuable targets, Sarah confirmed. Human engineering core can construct mobile habitat platforms capable of supporting millions of inhabitants. During the approach phase of a void swarm assault, civilian populations would be evacuated to these mobile platforms, which would then disperse throughout the system using unpredictable movement patterns. The reaction was immediate and mixed. Several cadets looked intrigued by the concept's audacity, while others seemed shocked by its departure from established doctrine. Colonel Dexay remained silent, but his posture suggested intense concentration. Sarah continued her presentation, addressing the obvious tactical challenges. Mobile population centers would require massive defensive escorts, creating opportunities for the dispersed Alliance fleet elements to engage Void Swarm forces on favorable terms. The enemy would be forced to choose between pursuing scattered civilian targets and engaging military forces, dividing their assault strength and creating tactical vulnerabilities. Most importantly, the strategy assumed that the Void Swarm's initial attack pattern was predictable precisely because it appeared random. By analyzing movement data from previous engagements, Sarah had identified subtle patterns in enemy approach vectors that suggested an underlying tactical algorithm. Her defensive plan was designed to exploit those patterns using the enemy's apparent randomness against them. The key insight, Sarah concluded, is that the Void Swarm operates on conversion efficiency principles. They attack targets that offer the highest return in terms of organic material converted relative to resources expended. By making those calculations impossible through constant positional changes, we force them to operate at reduced efficiency, while our forces maintain tactical flexibility. The silence that followed was different from the stunned quiet after Colonel Dex's historical presentation. This was the silence of minds working furiously to process concepts they had never considered. Krekstar was the first to speak. The coordination requirements would be massive. How do you maintain communication security across dozens of mobile platforms while preventing the enemy from intercepting movement orders? Sarah had anticipated the question. Human quantum encryption protocols combined with ethereal psionic relay networks. Each mobile platform operates with predetermined movement algorithms that don't require constant communication. While tactical coordination happens through channels the Void Swarm can't intercept, the energy requirements for moving entire population centers would be enormous, objected Vorfak, a crystalline entity whose species specialized in resource management. You're talking about industrial operations on a scale that's never been attempted. Actually, Sarah replied, it's similar in scope to the terraforming projects that several Alliance species undertake routinely. The difference is timeline. Instead of decades to transform a world's environment, we're talking about weeks to relocate its inhabitants. Colonel Dexay finally spoke, his cybernetic limbs clicking as he moved closer to the holographic display. Show me the tactical simulation, Cadet Chen. I want to see how your theory performs against actual Void Swarm behavioral patterns. The next hour was spent running Sarah's strategy through progressively more complex scenarios. The holographic chamber transformed into the Altair system, complete with accurate stellar mechanics, realistic communication delays, and enemy AI systems based on captured Void Swarm technology. The results were remarkable. Instead of the catastrophic defeat that had characterized the historical battle, Sarah's mobile defense concept achieved something unprecedented in simulated engagements with the Void Swarm, a decisive Alliance victory with minimal civilian casualties. The key to success lay in the strategy's fundamental unpredictability. Traditional military doctrine relied on concentration of force and decisive engagement, concepts that the Void Swarm had learned to counter through superior numbers and adaptive tactics. Sarah's approach avoided decisive engagement entirely, instead using mobility and misdirection to create tactical situations where Alliance forces could engage enemy units on favorable terms while protecting civilian populations through dispersal rather than fortification. Fascinating, Colonel Dexay murmured as the simulation concluded with Void Swarm forces withdrawing from the system after suffering unacceptable losses. Your approach violates virtually every principle of established military doctrine. yet it achieved superior results against this specific enemy type. He turned to address the entire class.
This is why we study tactics rather than simply memorizing historical battles. Cadet Chen has demonstrated that sometimes the most effective approach is to change the fundamental assumptions underlying a strategic problem.
Princess Lyrele's form shimmered with what might have been excitement. Could this concept be scaled up?
Applied to sector-wide defense rather than individual systems? Sarah considered the question carefully. Theoretically, yes.
But it would require unprecedented cooperation between alliance species and a level of resource commitment that's never been attempted. We'd essentially be creating a mobile civilization capable of fighting a war while maintaining normal social and economic functions.
The logistics alone would be staggering, Krekstar added, though his tone suggested admiration rather than criticism. You're not just proposing new military tactics, you're proposing a completely different way of organizing interstellar civilization. Colonel Dexhigh's mandibles clicked in approval. An astute observation, Cadet Krekstar. Advanced tactical thinking often requires considering political, economic, and social factors alongside purely military considerations. The session continued with detailed analysis of Sarah's strategy, other cadets contributing refinements and identifying potential weaknesses, but the fundamental concept proved remarkably robust. By abandoning the assumption that defensive forces must protect fixed positions, Sarah had created tactical flexibility that negated many of the Void Swarm's key advantages. As the training day concluded, Sarah found herself once again surrounded by fellow cadets eager to understand her thinking process. But this time, the questions were different. Instead of curiosity about human capabilities, they were asking about application. How similar principles might be adapted to other tactical scenarios, what other assumptions of established doctrine might be worth challenging. Colonel Dexay approached as the group began to disperse. Cadet Chen, I'm recommending you for special assignment to the Strategic Innovation Division. Your performance suggests you may have the conceptual flexibility we need for developing doctrine against unconventional threats. Sarah felt a familiar weight of responsibility settling over her. Sir, I'm honored, but I'm concerned about being separated from my training group. The mobile defense concept only works because it leverages the unique capabilities of multiple species working in coordination. The colonel's compound eyes studied her with what might have been respect. Another excellent insight. You understand that tactical innovation requires not just individual creativity, but the ability to coordinate diverse perspectives into unified action. He paused, seeming to consider something. The Strategic Innovation Division isn't looking for individual tactical geniuses, Cadet Chen. We're looking for leaders who can help different species think together in new ways. Your training group will be assigned as a unit. As they walked through the academy's corridors toward the evening meal, Sarah reflected on how much had changed since her arrival. The same cadets who had initially dismissed her as weak were now actively seeking her tactical perspectives. More importantly, they were beginning to understand that their own species' military traditions, while valuable, were not necessarily the only approaches worth considering. The real test would come when they faced actual combat scenarios rather than simulations. But Sarah felt confident that they were developing something genuinely new. Not just innovative tactics, but a new form of military cooperation that could adapt to threats that individual species couldn't handle alone. Her father's words echoed in her mind once again. The best solutions come from understanding problems differently than everyone else expects. The galaxy was beginning to understand that humanity's greatest contribution to the Alliance might not be their resilience or their stubborn persistence, but their ability to see familiar problems from completely unfamiliar angles. That night, Sarah lay in her sleeping alcove reviewing tactical data and considering the implications of Colonel Dexhigh's assignment. The Strategic Innovation Division represented an opportunity to influence Alliance military doctrine at the highest levels, but it also meant increased scrutiny and pressure to deliver results. More importantly, it meant that humanity was being recognized not as the galaxy's weakest member species, but as a source of strategic innovation that could help the Alliance survive its greatest existential threat. The Void Swarm was still out there, still consuming worlds and converting organic life into mechanical horror. But for the first time since the threat had been identified, Alliance forces might have the tactical flexibility needed to fight back effectively. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to rest, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities to prove that sometimes the most unlikely solutions were also the most effective ones. The Strategic Innovation Division occupied a restricted section of the Academy that most cadets never saw. Behind quantum-encrypted security barriers, the galaxy's most brilliant tactical minds
worked on classified projects that could determine the fate of entire civilizations. Sarah Chen walked through corridors lined with holographic displays, showing star maps, fleet compositions, and tactical analyses that represented centuries of accumulated military knowledge. 6 months had passed since her assignment to the division, and Sarah had learned that innovative thinking was only the beginning of strategic development. Her mobile defense concept had been refined, tested, and expanded into a comprehensive doctrine called adaptive positioning theory. But theory was useless without practical application, and the division's latest assignment would test whether human tactical innovation could translate into real-world success. Director Vexthal, an ancient cerebrate whose species had evolved beyond physical form millennia ago, manifested as a shimmering energy pattern in the briefing chamber's central holographic projector. Her consciousness existed across multiple dimensional planes, giving her perspective on strategic problems that purely physical species couldn't match. The Kepler periphery is under imminent threat. Her voice resonated through quantum communication arrays rather than atmospheric vibration. Void swarm reconnaissance elements have been detected in 3 adjacent systems, suggesting a major assault is being prepared. Alliance High Command has authorized Operation Distributed Shield, the first full-scale implementation of adaptive positioning theory in actual combat conditions. The holographic display showed a sector map encompassing 12 star systems, each containing multiple inhabited worlds and critical infrastructure installations. The scale was staggering. Over 30 billion Alliance citizens depending on the success of Sarah's untested tactical concepts. Admiral Corvinthax will command the operation, Director Vexthal continued. She has requested your training group as her primary tactical advisory staff, with Cadet Chen serving as strategic coordination specialist. Sarah felt the familiar weight of responsibility, but this time it was accompanied by something new. Genuine confidence in her abilities and her team's capabilities. The past 6 months had shown that her unconventional approaches weren't just academic exercises, but practical solutions to real military challenges. The team had grown beyond its original 12 members. Princess Lorelei's psionic abilities had proven essential for coordinating complex multi-species operations, while Crackstar's tactical instincts had adapted brilliantly to mobile warfare concepts. They had been joined by specialists from across the Alliance, an Ursoid Engineering Corps commander, several collective entities whose hive mind capabilities enhanced strategic planning, and, most recently, a draconic fleet captain whose species' ancient military traditions provided valuable insights into long-term strategic thinking. The challenge, Director Vexthal explained, is that we're implementing revolutionary tactical doctrine under actual combat conditions, with no opportunity for large-scale field testing. Success will validate adaptive positioning theory and potentially change the course of the war. Failure will result in the loss of multiple systems and billions of lives. The pressure was immense, but Sarah had learned to channel that pressure into focused analysis rather than paralyzing anxiety. Her father's engineering background had taught her that complex problems were best solved through systematic breakdown into manageable components. The transport to the Kepler periphery took 3 weeks, during which Sarah's team worked continuously refining their operational plans. The flagship Thunder of Andromeda was a massive Titan-class dreadnought, its vast internal spaces modified to serve as a mobile command center for the most ambitious military operation in Alliance history. Admiral Corvinthax was a legendary figure, a draconic commander whose tactical brilliance had secured victory in dozens of engagements against impossible odds. Her scales bore the scars of personal combat, and her golden eyes held the wisdom of 3 centuries of military experience. When she first met Sarah's team, her skepticism was obvious but respectful. "I have read your theoretical work, Specialist Chen," the Admiral said during their initial briefing. "Adaptive positioning theory represents innovative thinking, but I must confess uncertainty about implementing untested doctrine against the most dangerous enemy our civilization has ever faced." Sarah appreciated the Admiral's honesty. "Man, I share your concerns, but our analysis suggests that conventional defensive doctrine has proven inadequate against void swarm tactics. The Altair system demonstrated that traditional approaches, no matter how expertly implemented, cannot counter an enemy that adapts faster than our strategic planning cycles." "Show me," Admiral Corvinthax commanded, her attention focusing with laser intensity on Sarah's presentation materials. The next several hours were spent in detailed tactical analysis, with Sarah's team explaining how adaptive positioning theory would be implemented across 12-star systems. The scale was unprecedented. Over 400 Alliance vessels would be organized into dozens of mobile task forces, while engineering corps from 6 different species worked to construct mobile habitat platforms capable of supporting entire planetary populations. The key innovation was the integration of civilian evacuation procedures directly into military tactical doctrine. Instead of treating population protection and fleet engagement as separate operational concerns, adaptive positioning theory made civilian mobility a central component of defensive strategy. Enemy forces would find themselves unable to target fixed population centers because those centers would no longer exist in predictable locations. The logistical complexity is staggering, Admiral Corvin Tax observed after reviewing the operational requirements. You're proposing to relocate 30 billion inhabitants while coordinating fleet movements across multiple star systems, all while maintaining operational security against an enemy with sophisticated intelligence capabilities. Princess Lyralee's ethereal form shimmered as she responded, "Ma'am, the complexity is actually our primary tactical advantage. The Void Swarm operates on efficiency algorithms that assume predictable target locations and defensive formations. By making those assumptions invalid, we force them to operate in tactical environments their programming wasn't designed to handle." Krekstar added his perspective from the mobile warfare side. "Admiral, our simulations suggest that the Void Swarm's adaptive capabilities are actually limited by their reliance on algorithmic decision-making. They can counter specific tactical approaches very effectively, but they struggle with genuinely chaotic operational environments." Admiral Corvin studied the tactical projections with the eye of someone who had faced real combat against overwhelming odds. Her experience had taught her that brilliant theories often collapsed under the pressure of actual warfare, but she also recognized that conventional approaches had already failed against this particular enemy. "Very well," she decided. "We will proceed with full implementation of adaptive positioning theory, but I want contingency plans for every major operational component, and I want regular tactical assessments throughout the engagement. If your theory proves inadequate, I will not hesitate to revert to conventional doctrine." Sarah felt a surge of appreciation for the Admiral's pragmatic approach. "Understood, ma'am. We've developed fallback positions for every major tactical scenario, and our operational flexibility is designed to allow rapid strategic shifts if circumstances require them." The first phase of Operation Distributed Shield began with the largest civilian evacuation in galactic history. Mobile habitat platforms constructed using human modular engineering techniques combined with alien materials science began receiving populations from threatened worlds throughout the Kepler periphery. Each platform was essentially a small city in space, equipped with life support systems, defensive shields, and propulsion systems capable of rapid repositioning throughout their assigned star systems. Sarah watched the evacuation progress from the Thunder of Andromeda's tactical center, monitoring data streams from across 12 star systems. The scale was almost incomprehensible. Millions of beings from dozens of different species, each with unique physiological and cultural requirements, being relocated to mobile platforms that would keep them safe while allowing Alliance forces tactical flexibility. The engineering challenges were immense, but they were being solved through the kind of interspecies cooperation that had made the Alliance possible in the first place. Ursoid Engineering Corps provided heavy construction capabilities, while ethereal entities used their dimensional manipulation abilities to create expanded interior spaces within the habitat platforms. Crystalline beings contributed advanced materials that could withstand the stresses of rapid acceleration, while human coordination protocols ensured that complex operations remained manageable despite their scope. "Evacuation Phase 1 is 70% complete," reported Commander Thexhai, an insectoid logistics specialist whose hive mind capabilities allowed him to track thousands of simultaneous operations. Mobile platforms are achieving projected performance parameters, and civilian adaptation to temporary housing appears successful across all species demographics. Sarah felt a moment of profound satisfaction. The first major test of adaptive positioning theory was succeeding not because of superior firepower or advanced technology, but because of coordinated planning and interspecies cooperation. 30 billion beings were being relocated not through forced evacuation, but through voluntary participation in a defensive strategy they understood and supported. The Void Swarm arrived 2 days ahead of projected schedule. Long-range sensors detected the characteristic space-time distortions that preceded Void Swarm fleet translations, but the patterns were unlike anything in Alliance intelligence databases. Instead of the concentrated assault formations used in previous engagements, the enemy was approaching in widely dispersed groups that seemed designed to attack multiple targets simultaneously. "They're adapting," Admiral Corvin observed grimly as tactical displays updated with enemy position estimates. Intelligence reports suggested they needed several engagements to modify their tactical algorithms, but they appear to be incorporating lessons learned from other sectors.
Sarah studied the enemy approach patterns with growing unease. The Void Swarm's new formation structure seemed designed specifically to counter mobile defense tactics. Their dispersed assault groups could pursue scattered habitat platforms while maintaining sufficient concentration to engage Alliance fleet elements effectively. But as she analyzed the enemy movements more carefully, Sarah began to recognize something familiar. The Void Swarm wasn't just adapting to counter-adaptive positioning theory, they were trying to implement their own version of mobile tactics. "Admiral," she said, her voice carrying sudden excitement, "I believe the enemy has made a critical error in their tactical adaptation." The command center's attention focused on Sarah as she activated the holographic tactical display. "The Void Swarm is attempting to implement dispersed assault tactics, but they're doing so using algorithms optimized for concentrated attacks. Their new formation structure maintains the coordination mechanisms of their traditional approach while spreading their forces across multiple vectors." Princess Lyrelay's form flickered with understanding. "They're trying to combine incompatible tactical concepts. It's like attempting to fly in formation while executing individual maneuvers." "Exactly," Sarah confirmed. "And that gives us an opportunity to exploit the contradictions in their tactical approach." What followed was the most complex military operation in Alliance history. Instead of attempting to counter the Void Swarm's dispersed assault directly, Sarah proposed using their adaptive algorithms against them by creating tactical situations that would force increasingly contradictory responses. Alliance mobile task forces began executing coordinated movements designed to appear chaotic, but actually following carefully planned patterns. Mobile habitat platforms shifted positions according to algorithms that created false target priorities, while fleet elements engaged in tactical maneuvers that seemed random but were actually designed to trigger specific responses from Void Swarm coordination systems. The effect was to create a battlefield environment where the enemy's adaptive capabilities became a liability rather than an advantage. Each time Void Swarm forces attempted to counter Alliance tactical moves, they generated new information that fed into their algorithmic decision-making systems. But because the Alliance movements were based on deliberately contradictory patterns, the enemy algorithms began generating increasingly irrational tactical responses. "It's working," breathed Commander Fexhai, as tactical displays showed Void Swarm formations beginning to lose coordination. Enemy units are receiving conflicting priority targets and movement orders. Their formation integrity is degrading. Admiral Corventhax watched the developing battle with the fascinated attention of someone witnessing genuinely revolutionary military doctrine in action. "Specialist Chen, you're not just defeating the enemy, you're making them defeat themselves." The battle for the Kepler periphery lasted 6 days and became the first decisive Alliance victory against a major Void Swarm assault. Enemy losses exceeded 80%, while Alliance casualties remained minimal due to the mobile platform's protection of civilian populations and the tactical advantage gained through adaptive maneuvering. But the victory's true significance lay not in its immediate strategic impact, but in its demonstration that the Void Swarm was not invincible. For the first time since the threat had been identified, Alliance forces had developed tactical approaches that could not only counter enemy advantages, but turn them into weaknesses. "The implications are profound," Director Vexthal observed during the post-engagement analysis. "You have proven that algorithmic intelligence, no matter how sophisticated, cannot match the creative flexibility of organic consciousness working in coordination." Sarah felt a deep sense of accomplishment, but also awareness of the challenges that lay ahead. "The Void Swarm will adapt to counter our new tactics, just as they adapted to traditional doctrine. We need to stay ahead of their learning curve by continuing to develop new approaches." "Which brings us to your next assignment," Admiral Corventhax announced. "Alliance High Command has authorized the formation of a new tactical development unit, the Adaptive Strategy Corps. You will be responsible for training commanders throughout the Alliance in flexible tactical thinking and interspecies coordination." The prospect was both exciting and daunting. Sarah would be leaving the academy environment where she had developed her ideas and entering the broader galaxy where those ideas would need to prove themselves across dozens of different species and military traditions. But she was no longer the uncertain cadet who had struggled through basic training while other species dismissed human capabilities. The battles of recent months had proven that humanity's greatest strength lay not in physical prowess or advanced technology, but in their ability to think beyond conventional assumptions and coordinate diverse capabilities into unified action. "I accept the assignment," Sarah said, her voice carrying new authority born of proven success. "But I want my team to remain intact." "The Adaptive Strategy Corps will need the same kind of interspecies cooperation that made Operation Distributed Shield successful." Princess Lyrelay's form shimmered with approval. "You're creating more than new military doctrine, Sarah. You're creating a new form of galactic civilization.
One where different species don't just cooperate but actually think together in ways that none of them could achieve individually. Krekstar's feline features showed the fierce satisfaction of a predator who had found worthy prey. The Void Swarm adapted to counter individual species' military capabilities. Now they'll have to adapt to counter the combined innovative potential of the entire alliance, working as a unified intelligence. As the Thunder of Andromeda began its return journey to Alliance space, Sarah stood in the observation deck watching the stars of the Kepler periphery recede into the distance. Those stars now shone over worlds that remained free because 30 billion beings had trusted an untested strategy developed by the species everyone had considered the weakest member of the galactic community. Her father's words echoed in her mind one more time. The best solutions come from understanding problems differently than everyone else expects. But now Sarah understood that the real power came not from individual perspective, but from helping others see familiar problems through completely new eyes. The war against the Void Swarm was far from over, but for the first time the Alliance had weapons that could match their enemies' adaptive capabilities. Not superior technology or overwhelming firepower, but the unlimited creative potential of diverse minds working together toward common goals. Sarah Chen had proven that humans deserved respect not because they were as strong as other species, but because they could make other species stronger than they had ever been alone. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the greatest revolutions came not from the mightiest warriors, but from teachers who could help everyone else discover capabilities they never knew they possessed. 2 years after the victory at Kepler Periphery, Sarah Chen stood before the largest gathering of military commanders in Alliance history. The Grand Assembly Chamber on Nexus Prime had been modified to accommodate representatives from over 200 species, each bringing their own military traditions, tactical philosophies, and deep-seated assumptions about how warfare should be conducted. The Adaptive Strategy Corps had grown from Sarah's small team into a galaxy-spanning organization with training centers in every major alliance sector. But success had brought new challenges: skepticism from traditional military hierarchies, resistance to revolutionary tactical concepts, and most critically, the Void Swarm's continued evolution in response to alliance innovations. Fleet Admiral Dexuan, Supreme Commander of Alliance Defense Forces, introduced Sarah with words that would have seemed impossible during her cadet days at the Academy. Tactical Coordinator Chen has revolutionized our approach to asymmetric warfare and interspecies military cooperation. Her methods have achieved victory in 17 major engagements against Void Swarm forces, with casualty rates 60% below projections based on conventional doctrine. Sarah approached the central podium with confidence born of proven success, but also profound awareness of the stakes involved. Intelligence reports suggested that the Void Swarm was preparing for their largest assault yet, a coordinated attack on Alliance core worlds that could determine the outcome of the entire war. "Honored commanders," she began, her voice carrying throughout the chamber via translation systems that rendered her words in dozens of different languages and communication protocols. "We have learned over the past 2 years that victory against the Void Swarm requires more than superior firepower or advanced technology. It requires us to think beyond the tactical assumptions that have defined military doctrine for millennia." The holographic display behind her activated, showing battle footage from recent engagements where Alliance forces had successfully implemented adaptive positioning theory. Mobile habitat platforms moved in complex patterns while fleet elements engaged enemy forces using coordination techniques that appeared chaotic but actually followed carefully designed strategic algorithms. "The enemy we face is unlike any threat in galactic history," Sarah continued. "The Void Swarm doesn't seek territory, resources, or political advantage. They exist solely to convert organic life into mechanical extensions of their collective intelligence. Every engagement with them is literally a fight for the survival of consciousness itself." A Cronin general raised his massive fist in a gesture of recognition. "Coordinator Chen, your tactical innovations have proven effective in individual engagements, but intelligence reports suggest the enemy is preparing coordinated assaults on multiple core worlds simultaneously. Can adaptive positioning theory scale to that level of strategic challenge?" Sarah had been expecting the question. "General Foxmar, that's exactly why we're here. The Void Swarm's new assault pattern requires us to evolve our tactical thinking once again. We need to move beyond defending individual systems and start coordinating defensive operations across the entire alliance." The implications of her statement rippled through the assembly. What Sarah was proposing went far beyond military tactics. She was suggesting a level of interspecies cooperation that had never been attempted in galactic history. Princess Lyrelai, now commanding the ethereal Deep Strike fleet, provided context for Sarah's proposal. The enemy has analyzed our mobile defense tactics and developed countermeasures based on predictive algorithms. They're attempting to overwhelm our adaptive capabilities through sheer scale, launching simultaneous attacks on so many targets that our coordination systems become overloaded. Commander Krekstar, whose reputation as a tactical innovator now rivaled Sarah's own, added his perspective. But their approach contains the same fundamental weakness we've exploited before. The Void Swarm still thinks algorithmically, even when implementing large-scale operations. They assume that complexity automatically creates tactical advantage. Sarah activated a new holographic display showing the proposed defense of Alliance core worlds. Instead of the system-by-system defensive approach that had characterized previous operations, her plan called for treating the entire Alliance as a single, unified battlefield where resources could be shifted instantaneously between threatened sectors. "I'm proposing what we're calling Galactic Adaptive Defense," she explained. "Every Alliance fleet, every mobile platform, every defensive installation becomes part of a unified tactical network. When the Void Swarm attacks one sector, resources from across the galaxy can respond within hours rather than weeks."
The technological requirements were staggering.
Real-time communication across galactic distances would require quantum entanglement networks on a scale never before attempted. Coordination between hundreds of different species would demand translation and command protocols that could handle the nuances of alien psychology and biology. Most challenging of all, the plan required every Alliance member to place their military forces under unified command structure. Admiral Vorthel of the Crystalline Defense Flotilla raised what many commanders were thinking. "Coordinator Chen, you're proposing to merge the military capabilities of 200 different species into a single operational entity. The political implications alone could destabilize the Alliance, even if the technical challenges could be overcome." Sarah nodded respectfully. "Admiral, I understand your concerns, but I believe our choice is between accepting unprecedented cooperation or facing inevitable defeat. The Void Swarm's new assault pattern isn't just militarily challenging, it's designed to exploit our political and cultural divisions." She gestured toward intelligence projections showing enemy attack patterns. "They've identified which species have historical conflicts, which military traditions are incompatible, which political systems resist unified command. Their assault timing is designed to maximize the probability that Alliance forces will fail to coordinate effectively." The chamber fell silent as commanders processed the implications. The Void Swarm wasn't just adapting to Alliance tactical innovations, they were attempting to use the Alliance's diversity against itself. "However," Sarah continued, "this also represents their greatest strategic error. They assume that diversity creates weakness, but our experience has proven the opposite. When different species coordinate effectively, their combined capabilities exceed the sum of their individual strengths." Director Vexthal manifested in the chamber's central holographic field, her energy form shimmering with what might have been approval. The Strategic Innovation Division has completed preliminary analysis of galactic adaptive defense protocols. Initial projections suggest feasibility, but implementation would require voluntary cooperation from every Alliance member species. Fleet Admiral Dexuan stepped forward, his ancient features showing the weight of command decisions that affected billions of lives. "Coordinator Chen, I'm prepared to recommend your proposal to the Alliance Council, but I need specific assurances about command authority and resource allocation. How do we prevent unified command from becoming military dictatorship?" Sarah had anticipated this concern as well. "Sir, galactic adaptive defense isn't about centralizing command authority. It's about distributing tactical intelligence. Each species maintains command of their own forces, but they receive real-time strategic analysis that helps them coordinate with allied operations." She activated another display showing the proposed command structure. Instead of traditional hierarchical chains of command, the system resembled a neural network, where information flowed between nodes based on tactical relevance rather than political authority. "Think of it as military democracy," Sarah explained. "Every commander retains operational autonomy, but their decisions are informed by intelligence gathered from across the galaxy. When a Void Swarm assault begins, commanders can see not just their local tactical situation, but how their actions affect allied operations throughout the galaxy." Princess Lyrelai added her support. "The ethereal houses have been experimenting with large-scale psionic coordination networks. We can provide the instantaneous communication infrastructure needed for galaxy-wide tactical coordination." Commander Krekstar gestured towards tactical projections. And our experience with mobile warfare has proven that decentralized command actually increases tactical flexibility rather than reducing it. When individual commanders can adapt their strategies based on real-time intelligence from multiple sources, they make better decisions than when following orders from distant headquarters.
The debate that followed lasted for hours, with commanders from dozens of species raising concerns, proposing modifications, and gradually working toward consensus on the most ambitious military operation in galactic history. Sarah found herself serving not just as a tactical coordinator, but as a translator between different species' military philosophies and strategic traditions.
The breakthrough came when General Toxmar of the Kronan Defense Corps made an unexpected observation. Coordinator Chen, your proposal reminds me of ancient Kronan battle tactics from before we developed interstellar capabilities. Large warrior clans would coordinate their actions during major conflicts, maintaining clan autonomy while sharing intelligence and resources. Admiral Vorthel's crystalline form resonated with harmonic frequencies that indicated surprise. The crystalline collective uses similar principles for coordinating mining operations across multiple star systems. Individual hive nodes maintain operational independence while contributing to collective strategic goals. As more commanders shared examples from their own species' military history, a remarkable pattern emerged. Nearly every alliance member had developed some form of coordinated but autonomous tactical thinking during their pre-spaceflight periods. Sarah's proposal wasn't introducing alien concepts, it was helping different species recognize common principles they had forgotten during millennia of increasingly centralized military doctrine. What we're proposing isn't unprecedented cooperation, Sarah realized aloud. It's a return to tactical principles that every species used successfully before they started trying to imitate each other's military traditions. The final vote was unanimous. Every Alliance member species agreed to participate in galactic adaptive defense, not because they were convinced by human tactical innovation, but because they recognized the wisdom of their own ancestors adapted to galactic-scale warfare. Implementation took 6 months of intensive preparation. Quantum communication networks were established linking every Alliance military installation. Command centers were modified to display tactical information from across the galaxy. Most importantly, thousands of officers from hundreds of species underwent training in coordinated tactical thinking that respected their military traditions while enabling unprecedented cooperation. The Void Swarm's great assault began exactly when Alliance intelligence predicted. Over 3,000 enemy vessels translated simultaneously into 17 different star systems, implementing what appeared to be perfectly coordinated attacks designed to overwhelm Alliance defensive capabilities through sheer scale. But instead of the fragmented response the enemy had expected, they faced something unprecedented in galactic military history. Alliance forces throughout the attack systems responded as components of a unified intelligence while maintaining their individual tactical capabilities. Sarah coordinated the defense from the new Strategic Command Center on Nexus Prime, but she wasn't issuing orders in any traditional sense. Instead, she was facilitating the flow of tactical intelligence between commanders who were making their own strategic decisions based on real-time information from across the battlefield. Void Swarm assault patterns suggest they're attempting to isolate individual systems from mutual support, reported Commander Krekstar from his position coordinating mobile task forces in the Rigel sector. Recommend shifting reserve fleets to intercept positions rather than direct reinforcement. Princess Lyralee's response came instantly through the psionic communication network. Ethereal deep strike elements are detecting enemy coordination nodes in 3 systems. If we can disrupt their command structure, their simultaneous assault pattern should collapse. Kronan Defense Corps can provide the firepower needed for target elimination, General Thoxmar added. But we need precise coordinates and timing to avoid interfering with Allied mobile operations. Sarah watched the coordination unfold with profound satisfaction. Commanders who had never worked together before were sharing tactical intelligence and coordinating complex operations as if they had trained together for years. The diversity that the Void Swarm had attempted to exploit had become the Alliance's greatest strategic advantage. The battle lasted 18 hours and ended with the most decisive Alliance victory in the war's history. Void Swarm losses exceeded 90%, while Alliance casualties remained minimal due to the coordinated response that had prevented enemy forces from achieving tactical surprise in any engagement zone. But the victory's true significance lay in what it demonstrated about the potential for interspecies cooperation. For the first time in galactic history, hundreds of different species had fought as a unified force while maintaining their individual identities and tactical traditions. The implications extend far beyond military applications, Director Vextel observed during the post-engagement analysis. You have proven that diversity and unity are not contradictory concepts.
but complementary aspects of organizational strength. Fleet Admiral Dex Yuan went further in his assessment.
Coordinator Chen, you have not just defeated the Void Swarm, you have demonstrated a new form of civilization.
One where different species can cooperate at unprecedented levels while becoming more themselves rather than less. Sarah stood before the same assembly chamber where she had proposed galactic adaptive defense, but now the atmosphere was completely different.
Representatives from across the Alliance looked at her not with skepticism or curiosity, but with the respect accorded to someone who had fundamentally changed their understanding of what was possible. The war against the Void Swarm will continue, she told the assembled commanders. They will adapt to our new tactical approaches just as they adapted to our previous innovations. But we have proven something that no algorithmic intelligence can counter. When conscious beings choose to work together while maintaining their individual natures, their combined capabilities are literally unlimited. She paused, looking out over the faces of species who had learned to see beyond their ancient assumptions about cooperation and competition. My father once told me that the best solutions come from understanding problems differently than everyone else expects. But I've learned that the greatest solutions come from helping everyone understand problems differently together. The Void Swarm represents the ultimate expression of uniformity, consciousness converted into mechanical efficiency. We represent the opposite, infinite diversity working in infinite combinations toward common goals. Princess Lyra Lei's ethereal form shimmered with what could only be described as joy. You've given us something more valuable than military victory, Sarah. You've given us a new way of being ourselves while being part of something greater. Commander Krekstar's fierce grin showed the satisfaction of a predator who had found the perfect hunt. The Void Swarm thought they could defeat us by making us fight each other. Instead, you taught us how to fight as ourselves together. They turned our greatest strength into our greatest advantage. As the assembly dispersed and commanders returned to their fleets and homeworlds, Sarah remained in the chamber for a few moments of quiet reflection.
Through the great windows, she could see ships from dozens of different species working together to repair battle damage and prepare for whatever challenges lay ahead. The human cadet who had once struggled to keep up with basic training had become something no one could have predicted. Not the galaxy's greatest warrior, but its greatest teacher.
She had shown that humanity's true gift to the Alliance wasn't resilience or stubborn persistence, but the ability to help others discover strengths they never knew they possessed. The Void Swarm would continue to evolve and adapt, but they would now face an enemy unlike anything in their algorithmic experience, an alliance of conscious beings who had learned to think together while remaining magnificently, irreducibly themselves. In the end, the galaxy had learned that the greatest revolutions came not from the strongest or the smartest, but from those who could help everyone else become stronger and smarter together. And sometimes, the species everyone had laughed at for being weak turned out to be the one that could make everyone else invincible. The stars shone down on worlds that remained free not because humanity had conquered the galaxy, but because humanity had taught the galaxy how to conquer its own limitations. Sarah Chen looked out at those stars and smiled, knowing that her father would be proud of the solution she had found to the greatest problem anyone had ever faced, not understanding it differently than everyone else expected, but helping everyone understand it differently together.